For most of human history, we assume our ancestors were peaceful nomads, wandering through lush landscapes in perfect harmony. But the earth beneath our feet tells a bloodier story. Archaeological digs from Kenya to Germany reveal that the urge to kill our own kind isn't a modern invention. It is deep in our marrow. Why did we start going to war? Was it greed, territory, or something more primal buried in our DNA? To understand war, we have to look at Naturuk. Located near Lake Turkana in Kenya, this site is roughly 10,000 years old. It is a graveyard of violence. Archaeologists found the remains of 27 individuals. Many were bound, their hands tied, their skulls crushed by blunt objects or pierced by obsidian blades. They weren't buried with ceremony, they were left to rot in a lagoon. This isn't just murder, this is massacre. This is the earliest known evidence of organized group violence. It predates the rise of agriculture by thousands of years. The standard theory for decades was the Neolithic Revolution. Around 12,000 years ago, we stopped wandering and started farming. We developed private property. We grew grain, built storehouses, and settled in one place. Wealth became something you could touch, hoard, and steal. Logic dictates that war began because we finally had something worth fighting over. But Nataruk proves that wrong. Even in a world of hunter-gatherers, war existed. So, if it wasn't wheat or land ownership, what was it? It comes down to two things: resources and reputation. In the Paleolithic era, the environment was unpredictable. Climate shifts could turn a thriving forest into a barren wasteland overnight. When food became scarce, the most effective way to survive wasn't to search for more, but to take what your neighbor had. It was a zero-sum game. If you didn't kill them, they might survive to kill you. But it's not just about calories, it's about coalitional violence. Humans are tribal creatures. We evolved in small groups of maybe 50 to 150 people. This created an us versus them psychological switch. This switch is powerful. When we categorize people as part of our group, we feel empathy. When we categorize them as others, that empathy dissolves. This is a biological defense mechanism, a vestige of our evolutionary past. Think about the chimpanzees of Gombe. Jane Goodall famously observed chimps engaging in what looks remarkably like a coordinated patrol. They move silently through the forest, stalking members of a rival group. When they find a lone victim, they beat them to death. This isn't an isolated scuffle. It is a calculated, systematic attempt to eliminate the competition. Chimps share about 98% of our DNA. If they have the capacity for war, it shouldn't be a surprise that we do too. However, humans are different. We have language. We have the ability to spin narratives. We don't just fight over food, we fight over ideas. Look at the history of the Fertile Crescent. Around 9,000 years ago, the city of Jericho built a massive stone wall. It stood nearly 12 feet high with a 30-foot tower. Why build a wall if you aren't afraid of someone breaking in? This is the birth of defensive warfare. As populations grew, the stakes got higher. If a group of 50 nomads attacks another group of 50, it's a skirmish. If a city of 2,000 attacks another city of 2,000, it is a disaster. As societies grew, we needed more than just a reason to fight. We needed a reason to kill. This is where ideology and religion entered the fray. If you believe your God demands the land of your neighbor, or that your people are inherently superior to those across the river, violence becomes a moral imperative. It becomes a duty. By 3000 BCE, in ancient Mesopotamia, we see the transition from tribal raiding to professional warfare. We see the emergence of the Sumerian city-states like Uruk and Ur. They had standing armies. They used bronze weapons, composite bows, and early chariots. War was no longer about survival alone, it was about status. The stele of the vultures, dating back to 2450 BCE, depicts a Sumerian king leading his army over the bodies of his enemies. It is a glorification of power. Here is the uncomfortable truth. War acted as a strange catalyst for human organization. When groups are forced to defend themselves, they centralize power. They create hierarchies. They develop better logistics, better metallurgy, and more sophisticated governance. The pressures of war forced us to build the very structures of civilization. We moved from small tribes to city-states to empires, largely because the threat of total destruction forced us to unite. But let's look at the psychology again. Why did the individual soldier go along with it? It's the paradox of the group. If you stay in the tribe, you are safe. If you follow the leader, you gain protection. If you fight the enemy, you prove your loyalty. It is a social contract written in blood. But has human nature changed? We might have swapped obsidian spears for nuclear warheads and tribal skirmishes for global economic conflicts, but the underlying mechanisms remain. We still define ourselves by our groups. We still look at the other with suspicion when resources run thin. The tragedy of ancient warfare is that it solved problems in the short term while creating massive systemic problems in the long term. It created cycles of revenge that lasted for generations. It turned our natural ability to cooperate into an engine for destruction. We became the only species on Earth that systematically uses its own intellectual capacity to erase itself. Consider the aftermath of a war in the ancient world. When a city was sacked, the survivors were often enslaved or displaced. This led to massive demographic shifts. It moved culture, language, and technology, but it also erased languages, religions, and ways of life that we will never recover. We are looking at a fragmented history because we keep burning the books of our rivals. Are we hardwired for war? Evolutionary biologists would say yes, it is an adaptive strategy. If your ancestors hadn't been willing to fight, you wouldn't be here. But the same biologist will tell you that we are also wired for extreme altruism. We are capable of profound peace. The same tribal instinct that makes us hate the other is what makes us love our own community so fiercely. The question isn't whether we are inherently violent. The question is how we choose to direct that energy. We have spent 10,000 years building walls to keep people out. We have spent 10,000 years perfecting the art of killing. Maybe the next step in our evolution isn't technological. Maybe it is the recognition that our tribe has grown. In the modern world, the other isn't on the other side of a river. It is everywhere. Our survival no longer depends on defeating a neighbor. It depends on our ability to outgrow the ancient, bloody instinct that started at a lagoon in Kenya 10 millennia ago. We are the descendants of the winners of the wars of the past. That is a heavy inheritance. It means we carry the scars of every battle our ancestors fought. But it also means we are the first generation of humans with the global communication and the collective knowledge to realize that the cycle is ultimately a choice. The walls of Jericho eventually fell. The Sumerian empires turned to dust. The weapons of the Bronze Age became museum artifacts. Everything we fight for today will, in time, become the history that the next generation studies. Why did we start going to war? Because we were afraid. Because we were hungry. Because we were tribal. And because, in the harsh light of a changing world, we didn't know any other way to ensure our tomorrow. The question for us isn't why we started, it's why we continue. If we can understand that the urge for war is a ghost of our Paleolithic past, perhaps we can finally start to exercise it. The future isn't written in the bones of the dead at Nataruk. It is written by the choices we make today. Are we capable of building a civilization that doesn't require a wall? Or are we destined to repeat the history of the lagoon? The choice, for the first time in human existence, is genuinely ours to make.